Did the Dallas Mavericks just provide the New Orleans Pelicans a blueprint for extending Larry Nance Jr.? And now that he's healthy, what should we expect from the Pelicans big man? Plus, Swin Cash is a Hall of Famer. We're going to cover it all in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all on this Friday, final show of the week, and we are inching ever closer to the start of the Pelicans season. So thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday for y'all, breaking down everything you want to know about the team. We'll be recapping the wins, the losses, hopefully way more wins than losses, and all of the biggest stories, providing daily insight completely free. No paywall or anything like that, Monday through Friday for y'all during the season. So subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Tell a friend about the show. Don't let them be one of those Pelicans fans that think they should trade for some washed up player. Mike Conley Jr. is who I'm thinking of, right? We're not even going to do a segment on that because they should absolutely not be doing that. But I know you probably have a friend who's like, they should trade for Mike Conley Jr. Get them clued into Locked On Pelicans so they're not going to talk like that anymore. It's always annoying. I have friends like that, right? All the time. And of course, comment down below on YouTube and leave a 5-star review with a comment as well. Best things you can do to help keep the show free and 5 days a week if you want to support me here at Locked On Pelicans. So today's show, Larry Nance Jr. We know he's extension eligible for a contract. And I think the Dallas Mavericks might have just provided the contract, the blueprint, with their extension of Maxi Kleber as well. And then in the third segment, we'll get into Swin Cash because she is going to be a Hall of Famer this weekend at the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame inductions. Her resume is ridiculous as a player. So let's dive into Larry Nance Jr. and the contract. Maxi Kleber with the Dallas Mavericks. Their big man off the bench that plays both power forward and center, and has stats that are very similar for his career to Larry Nance Jr.'s, signed a 3-year, $33 million extension. Good piece of business for the Dallas Mavericks. Interesting to note, and I had no idea, despite only playing 5 years in the league, Kleber is older by about a year, a little less than a year, than Larry Nance Jr. He's over 30. Larry Nance Jr. is 29, which a little bit interesting to see. Kleber for his career, 7 points, 4.8 rebounds. He shoots 36% from three on 3.5 attempts per game. You know, he gives you about an assist per, gives you enough defense, but I wouldn't call him like a defensive expert. Just like a solid big man off the bench. 3 years, $33 million, so about $11 million per. Honestly, that's probably about right for Larry Nance Jr. Larry Nance Jr. is not going to get overpaid or anything like that. I think he kind of understands his value. And he signed a 4-year, $44 million deal with the Cleveland Cavaliers back in 2018. So averaging out to being $11 million per season. Honestly, that's about his value as a backup big man. I think that really is right. He's slightly, for his career, better than Kleber, though he's not as good of a three-point shooter. And I think that looms large in this to a certain point, but for his career, 8 points per game, 6.5 rebounds, almost 2 assists, and gives you some defense, steals, blocks, nothing, exciting there. For his career, 33% from three, not on much volume whatsoever, though, his largest run with the Cavaliers over the course of 3+ seasons, 35%, 34.6% from three on 2 attempts per game. But just a solid guy that can play the 4, can play the 5. So I think when you kind of compare these two players, $11 million per year sounds about right. I think Nance would be right to ask for $12 million per year, slightly above what Kleber is making, given that though the stats are comparable, he's better. I think Kleber has the advantage when it comes to three-point shooting. Maybe that drags the number down for Larry Nance Jr. And Kleber's not bad out in space, maybe a little bit better defensively than Larry Nance Jr. is, but it's so comparable. I'd try and aim a little bit higher, and he's, a year younger. I'd prefer probably to have him sign for 2 years versus three for $33 million. 2 for 22 sounds right. 2 for 24 is probably fine too. I think on a shorter contract gives you more future flexibility. But this is probably what the deal is going to end up being done. And maybe that third year for Kleber means Larry Nance Jr. now has a little bit of leverage to say, no. You got to give me that extra guaranteed year here. And if it's 3 years, $33 million, 3 years, $36 million, somewhere in that range, I'm very okay with it because I think he's going to be in line for a real big role this year. And we'll get into that in the next segment here. I want to talk about what next season looks like for a healthy Larry Nance Jr. But I think we've kind of seen this. It sounds like he and the Pelicans have had this done for a little while. There wasn't going to be much drama. It just hasn't been signed for whatever reason. You have to imagine we'll hear about this around the start of training camp, before the start of the regular season for sure. And this deal gets done. They probably have a number in mind. They're figuring out some of the final little details on the contract, if anything at all. But Kleber in this deal, it's probably going to at least kind of affect the market for a guy like Larry Nance Jr. His extension, I would expect to be very, very similar to 3 years, $33 million, somewhere in that range. Anything below that, big win for the Pelicans, David Griffin, and the front office, including Swin Cash. Maybe it'll add to her resume as she goes into the Hall of Fame a little bit as well. So I think that's kind of what we should expect contract-wise from Larry Nance Jr., which, by the way, very tradable contract. Not that they would, not that they should, but you like to have contracts of different sizes. A big contract, right? A bunch of medium-sized contracts in that 10 to 15, 16, 17, $18 million range, and then smaller ones too. Because for trade in the NBA, most of the time, not always, but most of the time, you need to match salaries. They got to be even. So if you want to bring in a $24 million player, you need to send out $24 million in salary. $11 million? That can help you get to a bigger number. Or you could package that with a smaller contract and bring in a guy who's like $15 million a year. It just gives you more flexibility going into trade talks than you would have had otherwise. So having contracts at various tiers, various levels is actually a really important thing. So getting Larry Nance Jr. on a contract that can at least be included if you need to make up salary for another star player, not Kevin Durant anymore. Thank God that's all behind us. But something to keep in mind that can be very important as well for what the Pelicans are looking to try and do and improve their roster this coming year. But I do think Larry Nance Jr. is going to be a really big part of this team. So let's look at what he could be, his role could be, and let's look at him, 1,000-yard view here going into next season in the next segment in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Before we do that, though, today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by BetOnline.net. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your pro and college football betting needs and sports info this season. So you can find all the latest football league developments. Season started yesterday, right? Game matchups, news, podcasts, including this year's opening week's games. If you want to get in on week one, if you really want to stick it to the Falcons, bet the Saints, you can do it over at BetOnline.net. BetOnline is also your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and any scores you could need. You can make the games more interesting. The lines change as time goes on, as quarters pass. You can keep betting. If you know the Saints are going to keep piling the points on the Falcons, and Falcons stink, right? Well, you can make even more money by getting in on the live in-game bettings. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite sports and events, including Major League Baseball, MMA, boxing, golf, and of course, football. So head to the website today. You can also get there on your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action over at BetOnline.net. BetOnline, where the game starts. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday for y'all. No paywall, anything like that. Breaking down everything you want to know about the team as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, because the tagline is your team every day. And we also have Locked On Saints. Ross Jackson, my good friend, kills it over there. He's at practice every single day. He's on the beat. It's awesome to see, and he provides some of the best analysis. He's an excellent host. Go check out Locked On Saints if you haven't already. Dude is just flat out fantastic. Make sure Locked On Saints is your second listen today, after making Locked On Pelicans your first listen. So let's continue to talk about Larry Nance Jr. We have an idea of what his contract is going to be now, and I definitely think the Maxi Kleber deal with the Dallas Mavericks sets that. So Larry Nance Jr., what's his role going to be? next year, right? In the regular season for New Orleans, he only played 9 games, all off the bench, 20 minutes of action per, 7.3 points per game. He shot 50% from 3, but on like less than an attempt per, grabbed 4.3 rebounds, dished out an assist per, and was just like, he's just like a solid big man that can play multiple positions, is going to rebound for you, and can go and do kind of a little bit of whatever it is that you need. He provides a lot of them. In the postseason, his role kind of changes. He took on more minutes and was higher up in the rotation for the New Orleans Pelicans. He was actually their 5th most guy in terms of minutes in the postseason. And when you look at what his role will be this year, we've looked at Trey Murphy a lot, right? Is he going to be kind of the 6th man for the Pelicans with his shooting, with the length, the rebounding? I definitely think he's going to be in line for a much bigger role this year. But really, if you're looking at kind of the 6th man, it easily could be a guy like Larry Nance Jr. And there's no way we can talk about him and his role next year without also partially talking about Jackson Hayes. Because this is partially a question about what role does Jackson Hayes have. And I know a lot of y'all are still really high on Jackson Hayes, despite him not really showing us much consistency through his first 3 years in the league. Larry Nance Jr. is playing more minutes than Jackson Hayes, despite Jackson Hayes starting in the postseason in that series against the Phoenix Suns. If Jackson Hayes is a power forward more so than a center, and Zion is now your starting power forward, is Jax your backup for, or is it Larry Nance Jr.? And I think based on kind of what we saw in the postseason, right? And postseason basketball is different than the regular season too, that it's going to be Larry Nance Jr. So you could easily see him being the 6th or 7th most, playing the 6th or 7th most minutes on this team next year. I don't know if that makes him like the de facto 6th man, right? And we did a show on if the Pelicans should go after Jordan Clarkson or Bojan Bogdanovic from the Utah Jazz. And I said, I don't know if you necessarily need a 6th man because the way you're going to stagger some of these lineups, right? You could, in theory, keep 2 of Zion, Brandon Ingram, and CJ McCollum out there on the court at any given time. If you pair Larry Nance Jr. in any of those lineups, he just fits and it works, right? He can play a small ball 5 next to Zion. You can have him play the 4 next to a guy like Jonas Valanciunas, who's playing very well for Lithuania in Eurobasket right now. So when you look at the kind of the variety of roles that he can play and the lineups that he fits in, that works, right? And that means he's going to get more minutes. Can Jackson Hayes do a similar thing? And I'm not sure, right? Is Jackson Hayes going to play the 5 next to Zion at the 4? They developed some chemistry 2 years ago, but is that going to be the same exact thing this year? And I'm not sure. I think they might have a little bit more trust in Larry Nance Jr. just to be more consistent and give you all of that. And it might come down to his 3-point shooting as well. If he can improve that and make a leap in that area, and that might be a stretch to ask. I don't think that's something that should be expected, but he's going to have an opportunity to take wide open threes because everyone on this team is going to have the opportunity to take wide open threes next year. If he takes about 3 threes per game and hits them at 35%, that's a big win for New Orleans. So when you look at him being able to play kind of at times 3rd option, maybe there's times when he's a 2nd option, 4th, 5th, it just kind of depends. He's going to be up and down in the pecking order depending on the lineups that he's with. This is a guy that conceivably could get closer to 12 points per game, I think. His season high was in 2019-2020 when he averaged 10.1. I think he can easily get above that for this coming season. I think 12, especially if he increases the 3-point shooting, is a very realistic number for him. He's going to grab some good numbers, I think. He's going to be in line for significant more minutes, right? Maybe 25, 26. That might mean it's going to be a bit of a stretch for him to get 12, but I think it could be somewhere in that area to a certain degree. Maybe it's shades a little bit lower. I might be saying it out loud. I'm like, that feels like a little bit high. But getting back closer to 10 points per game, let's say, I think is a very realistic number for him to achieve if he's taking 3 threes per game, 2 threes per game, and he'll have opportunities to get those looks. And he'll rebound well. That's what he does. He's a good enough defender, and I like the idea that you can play him as a small ball 5 next to Zion. I think Zion and Valanciunas, totally fine. They will work. We've seen that, not from those two, but we know that that's going to work because we've seen Zion play with guys like Steven Adams, Derek Favors as well. Larry Nance Jr., a small ball 5 that can play on the perimeter a little bit. That's a very good thing. So because of that, I think he's elevated in the rotation over some of these other guys and is going to be playing the 6th, 7th most minutes, on the low end, the 8th most minutes for this team. And if he's motivated after an extension, he's a great locker room guy and all of that. He's active in the community here in New Orleans too. He was doing like teacher wish lists off Amazon. Love to have a guy like that on the roster. So I think he's in line for a really great year in New Orleans. And even though he'll have a tradable contract, I don't think they're going to be looking to actively move him. Let me know what you expect from Larry Nance Jr. down in the comments below on YouTube. Was I right about what his minutes will be? How many points per game do you think he will average as well? Is 12 too high? Is 10 more realistic? Let me know in the comments down below. So final segment coming up, Swin Cash going into the NBA. Not the NBA, sorry, it's not the NBA Hall of Fame. It's the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. That's an awesome honor, and it's more Hall of Famers now with this Pelicans team. Let's talk about that coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday for you all, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Leave a comment. You can do it now on Spotify too. Leave a 5-star review with a comment, and of course, comment down below on YouTube. Helps keep the show free and 5 days a week for y'all. As the easiest thing you can do to support the show. It takes like 30 seconds. Please, please, please comment. Comment every day if you can. If you want to say comment, that's fine. If you want to say hi, that's awesome too. Whatever it is you want to, throw it down there in the comments on YouTube. And now for your second listen, get caught up to date on the latest news and rumors in the NBA in just 30 minutes every day with Locked On NBA. Locked On NBA, your daily NBA update in just 30 minutes. I co-host every Wednesday with John Krause of Locked On Celtics. We got rotating hosts. We've been doing this for 4+ seasons now. It's an awesome show. We have a lot of fun on there. Give it a listen, especially on Wednesday when I'm on there every day on our big national show. Make sure Locked On NBA, your second listen. That's also been 5 days a week throughout the whole off season when most people have dropped. We never did, which I think is pretty cool for us to come up with that kind of content, provide that insight and entertainment, even in like the dregs of the off season. So, Swin Cash goes into the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame this Saturday, I think, is when the inductions are. What a cool honor. What a cool honor. It was announced back on April 22nd that she was going to be among the 2022 inductees. She is one of 11 women to receive an Olympic gold medal, an NCAA championship, a FIBA World Cup gold medal, and a WNBA championship. She is as accomplished as they get when it comes to her playing career. 2 titles at UConn. 3 titles in the WNBA, 2 gold medals on the Olympic team, and that 1 FIBA title. Just an incredible basketball career she's had. And, getting someone like that who innately understands the game, who's a player, right? And can relate to a lot of the guys in today's NBA, even though, she played in the WNBA, didn't play in the NBA. She was a player. She knows what they go through. And I think that was a big part of the reason why David Griffin really wanted to bring her into this Pelicans roster. And I think we all love her. The faces she makes during the draft lottery, the fact that you have a woman that's in such a high up position here in the NBA and kind of making inroads with that, waves with that. She's the vice president of basketball operations and team development. It's an incredible thing, right? It shows you something that David Griffin said early on in his tenure here. I think it was his introductory press conference of he just wanted to get the best people in, get them all on the bus, and then we'll figure out where the bus is going and how to drive that bus, but bring them in. And one of the first hires he made was Swin Cash. And clearly that front office, despite a rocky tenure at times, has gotten things right in terms of how they treat players, deal with players, and connect with some of the players, especially now that Zion's on board. And Swin Cash definitely has been a very, very big part of that. Someone who has that kind of track record, 3 titles, 2 NCAA titles, 2 gold medals, you got to listen to someone like that when they come to you about whatever it is. And you have another Hall of Famer, of course, in Teresa Weatherspoon here on the team as well, who's going to be there at the induction with Swin Cash. Just a real cool thing, right? The Pelicans have 2 Hall of Famers working with them right now. One is a coach, one in the front office. And you see that the players love Teaspoon. They love her working with her. It's nice to see this team be a little bit progressive on that front, bringing women in, whether it's coaching or in the front office, because this is not something that is normal. And I appreciate that. I appreciate the kind of out-of-box thinking that David Griffin has shown with that. And I kind of agree. Just get the best people in here, and then we'll all figure it out because you got smart basketball minds in the building. So great award for Swin Cash going into the Hall of Fame, really highlighting how tremendous her career has been. And we should feel lucky that someone like that is working with the Pelicans and so deeply invested and involved with this team and the city too on multiple fronts. So tremendous honor. Give it a watch if you get a chance this weekend, and tell Swin Cash congratulations for going into the Hall of Fame. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. This week of Locked On Pelicans will probably be 3 days a week next week. And then maybe after that, we're going to be jumping back to 5 days a week. It might be 2 more weeks. But by the 26th or something like that, which should be media day as well, is when we are going to go back to 5 days a week. So it's coming soon because the season is coming soon. First preseason game, October 17th. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, and I'll be back with y'all on Monday.